Welcome back, Longhorn fans, to another live edition of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports here on a Monday evening, a fine Monday evening in the city of Houston. I'm your host, yours truly, Michael Ween, diehard Texas sports fan. We are now approaching Texas football season. It is a mere 12 Colt McCoy days away from the season opener against Rice, and we have a ton to talk about today, including all the intel that we have been gathering the past couple weeks from Texas Longhorn Fall Camp. We got quarterback talk with Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning, uh, Malik Murphy. We got running back battle talk to talk about. We got a defense that's really stood out in camp today, and that's going to be the main topic of today is talking about this 2023 Texas defense. How good can this defense be based on what we're hearing out of fall camp? What does this roster look like? We're going to be talking about all of that. This is your place, your home for everything Texas sports, not just Texas football, through the end of time. Monday and Thursday, I'll be live for about 30 minutes to an hour talking Texas sports. So if you love Texas sports, this is your place every Monday and Thursday evenings. Once we get into football season, I'll be giving you game recaps on Monday. Those could be good or bad. We will see. It's a lot of mixed bag with Texas typically. And then Thursday, we'll be picking games for the upcoming week and talking about Texas's upcoming opponent. We'll also be talking some recruiting and a lot of other stuff pertaining to Texas basketball once that gets a little closer. And then Texas baseball, of course, is big on UT's campus. The volleyball team won the national championship last year. So if they get there again, we might have to talk a little volleyball as well. Let's jump right into the heart of this. Waste no more time here on this Monday evening, 12 days before the Texas opener against Rice next Saturday, September the 2nd. We're now 19 days away. That would mean from part 2 of Texas, Alabama. We all know what happened last year. This time, 19 days from now, it'll be going down in Tuscaloosa. And there are some high expectations for what Texas may or may not be able to do in that game. A lot of Texas fans believe they can win that game. And if they're going to win that game, well, they're going to need a pretty goddamn good defense. And, well, they might have that this year. Let's get right into our intel from this year's fall camp. We're now a week away from game week. This time next week, and I'm sure they've already been doing it, they'll be putting in the game plan for Rice and getting ready to play a football game that matters on Saturday at DKR. In the middle of the day, it's a 2:30 game on Fox against Rice. I'm sure this Texas football team is conditioned now, practicing in the heat every day, as it doesn't let up this time of year in the state of Texas. But that will be an interesting factor, I have to say. We have a one viewer. If you want to, you can leave your questions and or comments in the chat, and I will answer your questions as we go along once I see them. But if not, just make sure you leave a like and subscribe to our channel if you like what we do here. The biggest thing that Texas fans have to be excited about, knock on wood, so far from fall camp, is that there have been no injuries so far. If we think back to last year, you had Junior Engelau, one of the top offensive linemen on this team, go down, and Isaiah Nair, the transfer from Wyoming last year at the receiver position, who they were counting on to sort of be the number 2 guy next to Xavier Worthy in the deep threat, the guy that would take the top off the defense, give Quinn Ewers that guy he could go to deep down the field. They went down in the same scrimmage on the same day of fall practice last season, right around this time. So far this year, and it's the biggest news so far of fall camp. Knock on wood, and don't blame me if there's an injury this week. We sure hope that there is none for putting this into the ether. But there have been no injuries of note so far in fall camp. And this is the time where we've heard about other injuries around the country. I mean, Texas A&M, for that matter, just recently lost their starting tight end due to a torn ACL or Achilles, something along those lines. Texas has yet to sustain an injury. That is great news. Hopefully, we can make it through one more week and get to game week with a totally, fully healthy Texas football team, and then get through that game and go to Bama fully healthy. That would be awesome. That's the best news of all. I know people want me to talk about the quarterback position. What's been going on there? Well, Ewers has had a good camp. All the reports this offseason about him changing his diet, getting into better shape, lost about 15 to 20 pounds, working hard in the offseason, studying more film, not going on a spring break this past year as he did last year, staying home to work with his trainer. I believe he has the same trainer as one Patrick Mahomes, I think. So he stayed home, worked with his trainer, worked out with some of these Texas receivers, has really deep dived into the playbook. And there are high expectations for Quinn Ewers. As we all know, we can talk about the receivers, we can talk about the running backs, we can talk about the offensive line, we can talk about how good or, how elite this Texas defense needs to be. But if Quinn Ewers plays to an all Big 12, all American type level, with the talent that Texas has on this team, that's really all it's going to take for this Texas team to reach the heights that it wants to reach this year, which would mean, in my opinion, getting at least to the Big 12 championship game, winning that game, and setting yourself up to play in some New Year's Six Bowl and or maybe get into the college football playoff. Again, this is the last time Texas is playing in the Big 12, their last year in the Big 12 before they move to the SEC next July, or I guess right before football season next year. And it's year 3 of Sark, man. And it's year 2 of a very talented starting quarterback in Quinn Ewers. He's got all the talent in the world. People rave about his arm talent. He was like the second or third highest rated quarterback to ever come out of high school. When he came out of high school a couple years ago and went to Ohio State redshirted, came to Texas and played his freshman year last year. He's got all the talent in the world, and if he plays well this year, he's got first-round draft pick written all over him. And so the point I'm trying to make here is he's had a good camp. We haven't heard a lot of reports about turning the ball over. These Texas quarterbacks as a whole, Arch Manning and Malik Murphy included, have done a very good job during camp taking care of the football, both in scrimmages and in drills and team drills in practice. So that's great. We know that Quinn Ewers is invested. This is his team. He's expressed that much. Sark has expressed that. And there are high expectations. I'm a little concerned that we haven't necessarily heard through the first 2 scrimmages, and I believe there will be a third scrimmage this upcoming Saturday, but it will be a light scrimmage. It won't be like the first 2, as they'd be just a week away from game week, and that's when you really don't want to risk any injury. The one thing that concerns me just a tad is that we haven't heard that Quinn Ewers in one of these scrimmages has just been the absolutely best player on the field, which is sort of what you want to kind of hear from your quarterback position. If you have a guy the talent of Quinn Ewers and you're expecting him to play up to some all Big 12, live up to the 5-star hype all-American type-ish level. But that's not all his fault. He's still been really good. I don't think there's too much reason to be concerned there. But I think Texas fans would even be feeling better than they are now if we had something where maybe on a day, one of these scrimmages, Sark had come out and said, well, Quinn Ewers, best player on the field today. That hasn't happened yet, but the quarterback room as a whole has been good, not turning the ball over. Quinn, this is his team. He's got all the tools to make it happen. There are high expectations. He needs to play a lot better and more consistently than he did a year ago. We need to see closer to what he was against Alabama and Oklahoma more consistently than we do what we saw against Oklahoma State and some of the other games that Texas inexcusably lost last year. We need to see more of that Quinn than we do the latter, right? And so I think it can happen. I've heard this quarterback room has had a really good camp. Quinn's had a really good camp. He just hasn't had that day where you come out like you do at some of these other camps around the country where, they come out and say, Caleb Williams, best player on the field by far. He's our guy. He's going to be in the conversation for the Heisman Trophy, as we know. I mean, that's pretty obvious. But Drake May at North Carolina, best player on the field day in, day out. He's our quarterback. Michael Penix Jr. at Washington, who we saw play against Texas in the bowl game last year. Best player on the field. He's our guy. We haven't heard that from Quinn or Sark yet, but I have no concern really. I think he's going to play up to an all Big 12 type level. And if he does that, well, good things are in store for the Texas football program. One more note on the quarterback front. When we came into camp, it was obviously Malik Murphy as the number 2, getting most of the reps with the 2s, and then Arch Manning with the 3s when we came into camp. And there was a clear line of delineation between Malik Murphy based on what we saw in the spring in that fantastic spring game performance that he put on, and where Arch Manning was in his development in his first semester on campus. I mean, he just turned 18. And I feel like and rightfully so, I mean, his name, the Manning name, all of the things that come with that, we understand it, right? But didn't look all that great in the spring. And there was just a clear delineation between where we thought Malik Murphy was and where we thought Arch Manning was coming into the fall. Since from when fall camp started till now, Arch Manning has made noticeable strides in his development to the point where on Saturday at the scrimmage, Malik Murphy and Arch Manning were splitting reps evenly with the 2s. Again, Malik Murphy and Arch Manning were splitting reps evenly with the 2s. Whereas at the beginning of fall camp, Arch Manning barely, if ever, got any reps with the 2s. It's not to say that Malik Murphy has had a bad fall camp. He's had a fine fall camp. He's been good. He's been consistent. He just hasn't stood out. And in their first scrimmage that they had, not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before, Arch Manning had arguably his best practice as a Longhorn. He had, I think, a 70-yard touchdown run on a Texas defense that had been dominating largely to that point, and looked accurate with the football, was completing a lot of his passes, was efficient. And ever since then, ever since that first scrimmage, he's really made strides in consistency and just looks really, really good in fall camp. Now, what does all this mean? Well, we don't know. Maybe they just want to get Arch some run with the twos. Maybe they just want to, since he was doing really well against the threes, well, now they want to see him against the twos. It makes sense, right? Sometimes these coaches just want to experiment and see what they have. I don't think it means anything depth chart wise come week 1, come next Saturday. I don't think you're going to see Arch Manning as listed as the number 2 quarterback behind Quinn Ewers as the official backup. I still think if we stretch it out to a larger sample size from what we saw in the spring and what we've seen in the fall, Malik Murphy, I still think has a clear edge there. And look, I mean, once you put the problem that Texas has right now, and it's a good problem to have, is that once you elevate Arch Manning, who's been on campus for a mere 6 months at this point, above Malik Murphy, you risk losing Malik Murphy to the transfer portal. And that's something that I don't think the Texas coaching staff wants. Nobody wants that. Everyone, Texas fans, the Texas players, the Texas team, they love Malik Murphy. They say he's one of the absolute bona fide leaders on this team. They absolutely love the guy. They don't want Malik Murphy to transfer. And so I think that's probably the biggest reason. And I think they have big plans for Malik Murphy in the back of their mind. They want Quinn Ewers to play well and go first round of the draft or get drafted in this upcoming next year's draft. And they want that quarterback battle to go down next season going into the SEC between Malik Murphy and Arch Manning. That's what the Texas coaches want. They don't want to all of a sudden, based on a 2-week small sample size of practice, to all of a sudden elevate Arch Manning above a guy who's been on campus now for 2 years and has worked his absolute ass off to get through injuries and play well in spring ball and fall camp to get his maybe opportunity if something were to happen to Quinn Ewers this season. So I don't think it means anything in the short term as far as where this quarterback room stands going into the season here in short 12 days time. But you can sleep well at night knowing that with each passing day, we hear more and more good things about Arch Manning. And that's awesome. That is absolutely awesome. We want to continue to hear that throughout practices during the season, that there's this big competition between Malik Murphy and Arch Manning, and it is going to be awesome next year going into the SEC. That's going to be one of the biggest storylines in college football. Point blank, period. Mostly due to the Manning name. Like, it's his name. So that's where things stand at the quarterback position. We had to talk some quarterback. We won't talk that much more offense here today. We're going to be talking a lot of Texas offense on Thursday's episode. But one more thing I did wanted to mention as it pertains to the Texas offense in fall camp. The Texas running back battle is very intriguing right now. Now, I do expect Jonathan Brooks to be the starter against Rice. However, sources have come out and raved about the 5-star freshman, CJ Baxter. To the point where in last Saturday's scrimmage, this past Saturday, CJ Baxter was actually splitting first-team reps with Jonathan Brooks. Now, once again, I think Jonathan Brooks will start next Saturday, but sources have gone as far as to say that Cedric Baxter, the 5-star freshman from the state of Florida, from this past 2023 recruiting class that finished number 3 rated overall in the country, along with guys like Arch Manning and Malik Muhammad and Anthony Hill and Jonte Cook. I mean, the guys that we're hearing about now, the class that's going to bring Texas back to prominence, per se. Sources have come out and said Cedric Baxter will start at the running back position before the season is finished. And I don't doubt it whatsoever. There's a saying in college football: if a 5-star is even, then he's leaving. And it's just a matter of time before I think CJ Baxter becomes the workhorse, uh, for Texas in that backfield, uh, and overtakes Jonathan Brooks. It's just a matter of time before that happens. Jonathan Brooks is a solid guy. I think Keelan Robinson has solidified himself as the number 3 guy, not only because of his capabilities at the running back position, and what he can do as sort of a gadget guy offensively with his speed, but what that guy does on special teams. He's arguably the best special teams player on the Texas roster. And so just by that aspect and that fact, they have to have Keelan Robinson on the 2 deep, or on this depth chart going into the season. So I think your running backs are as follows: Jonathan Brooks to start, CJ Baxter right there, and I think eventually will start, and then Keelan Robinson, the transfer from Alabama from a couple of years ago. And then what does that mean for a guy like Jadon Blue? Well, I think that puts Texas in danger and potentially losing Jadon Blue, but they're so deep at running back right now. And again, they don't have a guy like Bijan. And they're probably not going to have a guy like Bijan maybe ever again, right? But they still have three really, really good running backs. This is, I believe, one of the deepest backfields in the country. And with this offensive line, man, I think the running back position will be just fine without Bijan and Roschon. But if you're a Texas fan and you're expecting Bijan level production out of this backfield or from one particular back, I would temper your expectations just a little bit. Bijan Robinson was the number 8 overall draft pick in last year's draft. And you can make the argument he was the best flat-out football player in last year's draft, or this past year's draft. I don't think Texas is going to have that again, at least for the foreseeable future, unless a guy like CJ Baxter can potentially reach those heights. But I think one of the bigger stories is these freshmen have come in right away and made an impact. We've heard lots of good things about the 5-star freshman receiver, Jonte Cook out of DeSoto. He's working himself in already to the Longhorns receiver rotation. He'll be right in there with A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy and Jordan Whittington and Isaiah Nayer. Like, he's going to get on the field in a lot. I think it's good that we've heard good things on the defensive side about the 5-star freshman linebacker, Anthony Hill, in practice. We've heard really good things about Malik Muhammad, the borderline 5-star corner, who I'll talk about here in a little bit. This freshman class has come onto campus and immediately made it known that they are going to make an impact one way or another on this Texas football team. And that speaks to the amount of depth that this team has at pretty much every position outside of maybe one or two that I'll talk about as we get into our defensive breakdown here in a couple of minutes. So that's kind of where things stand offensively. I mean, it's good to hear that Isaiah Nayer, who's working himself back from an ACL injury, has had a couple good practices lately and has taken the knee brace off. He looks fully healthy. Coaches have raved about his athleticism and his size, his ability to make contested catches downfield. Love that. A.D. Mitchell has scored touchdowns and been really productive in these scrimmages. I think there's a world out there where at the end of the season, you look back and A.D. Mitchell potentially has the best season of any Texas receiver on this roster. I think he's that good. And, Steve Sarkisian has said such. I think Texas got them an absolute gem an AD Mitchell to transfer from Georgia. But if this offense wants to be the offense that we think it can, you're going to need Xavier Worthy to return to the type of guy that he was in his true freshman season 2 years ago. He just wasn't that last year, and it was it was for a variety of reasons. I think a lot of that blame goes to Xavier Worthy for a lot of those drops, and some of those balls. I think even Xavier Worthy would tell you he should have caught. But reports came out after last year ended that he was dealing with a broken hand, and there were so many other things that went into his struggles. I expect another huge year from Xavier Worthy, an All-American type year. In fact, today it was Worthy and Kelvin Banks that were officially voted preseason second-team All-American players by the AP. So that's exciting for both of those guys, and that just shows you, despite a down year from Xavier Worthy, how good people across the country think this guy is. And he is. He's just that talented. I think he could be a borderline first-round pick if we have the type of season that we think he can have. But A.D. Mitchell, at least in these scrimmages, has been the most productive Texas receiver. He scored a touchdown on Saturday's scrimmage. I believe had one or two in the scrimmage before that, the week before. So look out for A.D. Mitchell. One guy who hasn't particularly had a great camp is J.T. Sanders, the talented tight end, the former five-star athlete. But I don't worry at all about Jatavion Sanders. Tough practices, going up against what I think is going to be a really good Texas defense, going up against the ones. It's just practice. He's one of the best players. I think one of the 5 best players, period, on this Texas football team. Don't worry too much about JT Sanders. He's going to play a huge role in this Texas offense, no doubt. And the fact that we're even talking about this just shows you how deep and how talented the Texas offense is as it concerns receivers, tight ends, and running backs. Quinn Ewers has really no excuses as it pertains to what he has at his disposal on the football field come next Saturday if Texas stays fully healthy, which then again, I'll go back to that over and over and over again. Knock on wood, Texas has stayed healthy through the first 3 weeks of camp, 3+ weeks of camp. And that's huge because last year, you remember, Isaiah Nayer goes down, Junior Angelau goes down. They had a couple other injuries throughout, that really hurt this team. So that's the biggest news. But with all that being said, I guess we'll transition as we're about half an hour in. I expect to go about an hour today, 45 minutes to an hour. That's really what we've been hearing from an offensive standpoint. And we'll be talking a lot more about the offense from a roster perspective and what we expect from the offense as a whole on Thursday's episode. But today, our focus is going to be on the one, the only, the Texas defense, this Texas defense, man, they've had a really, really good camp. The reports, there have been rave reviews about this Texas defense going into, I think it's year 3 under Pete Kwiatkowski, who was under a lot of fire after year 1, the Texas 5-7 season, where Texas was not a good defense whatsoever. But then again, a lot of that had to do with the personnel that they had. It wasn't up to standard. It wasn't up to par. That wasn't Sark's team. I mean, a lot of the excuses and the reasons that they use apply to that situation. Pete Kwiatkowski, when you think about it, is one of the more proven defensive coordinators out there in college football with what his track record tells you. I mean, what he did at Washington, they were putting players into the NFL, on a yearly basis, developing guys and putting them into the NFL. And that's what I think the next step is for him at Texas, is now that they have these guys and they're bringing these talented guys in, got to start producing some NFL players, especially on the defensive line and in the secondary. Um, and I think they're going to. Last year, 2022, after what was a bad 2021, Texas improved defensively. They made a big defensive leap last year, and the stats prove it. They lowered their points per game allowed from 31 to 21 last year. Uh, Teams averaged over 1.5 yards less per carry than they did the previous season in 2021. And they had, a really good season defensively. And it was led by the one, the only Jalen Ford, the middle linebacker who waited his first 2 years to play. Really got a lot of playing time last year next to Diamante Tucker Dorsey and DeMarvion Overshone, and ended up, finishing second in the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year voting. Led the team in interceptions, led the team in a bunch of other categories. Was a really productive player, so much so that he was named to, I believe, the preseason All Big 12 first team this season. People expect big things out of Jalen Ford, and he had a huge year last year, which attributed to Texas' success defensively with what he did in the run game, what he was able to do making plays in the passing game, being in the right place at the right time, making plays, forcing fumbles, et cetera, et cetera. He was the best player on this Texas defense a year ago and was one of the bigger reasons why they improved so much. Now, they do have to replace a couple key guys that had been on campus for quite a while and were key contributors last year. We all know about Moro Ojomo and Keandre Coburn on that defensive line. Two fairly productive players for Texas, good players for Texas, good, solid contributors. They were off to the NFL, but they're, of course, going to bring back T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. We'll talk about the defensive line here in a second. And they, of course, bring in Minnesota transfer Trill Carter, who was a good starter in the Big Ten at the University of Minnesota. And then, of course, you have to find a way to replace DeMarvion Overshone. And that's a big question for this Texas defense. We know what they have in Jalen Ford. Question is, who is going to be the guy next to Jalen Ford? I think that's one of the bigger questions on this Texas roster, period. But we'll give you some answers here in a minute. There's Anthony Hill, who's looked really good in fall camp and made a lot of noise. A guy who's going to see time, even though it might not be full time at that position next to Jalen Ford at the, weak side linebacker. We've heard a lot of good things from some of the freshman young linebackers, but that's a question mark. And then, they have to replace a couple guys in the secondary, but the secondary might be behind the receiving corps the best position group on this Texas roster, period. So with all that being said, let's give you guys the quick 10-ish minute breakdown of this Texas defense, where it stands right now. What do we expect it to look like next Saturday and for the entire season? And what do we expect from this Texas defense? They made a huge leap last year under Pete Kwiatkowski, and there are some high expectations based on what they've been doing in fall camp and their performance for this upcoming season and what this Texas defense could be. So I guess we'll just go all three levels, and we can start on the defensive line. Now, of course, they lose Keandre Coburn and Moro Ojomo, but they're bringing back two really good, solid, veteran-type guys. T'Vondre Sweat, everybody knows, all Texas fans know about this guy. He's a fifth-year senior with a lot of experience. He started 9 games last year. He's the top returning tackler on this defensive line. He's going to be relied upon to be an experienced leader, lead some of these younger guys behind him, and lead this Texas defensive line in a better place when he supposedly leaves for what we hope is the NFL draft at the end of this year. Huge, 6'4", 360. Had a really good year last year. Was an All Big 12 honorable mention. Didn't quite make the All Big 12 teams, but was really good. Led the defensive line in tackles. And I expect him to have a really good season and finish his Texas career strong. Texas is absolutely going to need that. They're going to need him to step into that Moro Ojomo, Keandre Coburn type leader role on this defensive line and be a highly productive player, which he's proven that he can be. He's a fifth-year senior, a lot of experience, knows what he's doing. Huge, 6'4", 360, good size. I think he's going to have a really good year. And he'll be playing next to Byron Murphy, who throughout fall camp, we've heard a ton of good things about. He's finally going to get the full-time position on this interior defensive line. The former DeSoto High School product, same high school as this year's five-star freshman receiver, Jonte Cook, and former Texas Rivals top 50 recruit in the state of Texas. Byron Murphy, from I believe he was the 2020 or 2021 recruiting class, spent his first two seasons getting playing time but not starting. He's finally going to get that opportunity. And Texas fans and the program, Texas coaches expect a lot from Byron Murphy. Really talented player, expected to do great things. He's a preseason All Big 12 pick, despite only having 2 career starts. That tells you everything you need to know. So if this Texas defense wants to get where they want to go and where I think they can go, those 2 guys are going to be key. Stopping the run, creating pressure from an interior standpoint. Remember, last season, Texas was one of the top teams in the country at actually getting pressure on the quarterback. They just didn't capitalize on it very often. So we're looking to Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat to have big years in that department. That's what I'll be looking for game 1. How much interior pressure can they create? And it's going to be key against Bama as well. Bama is going to be a team this year that isn't going to be as reliant upon their quarterback as they have been in recent years. They don't have that guy at quarterback like they did in Mac Jones and Bryce Young. They just don't. And Nick Saban will tell you as much, at least right now. Texas is going to have to be prepared on the interior to do a good job stopping the run. They have the bodies to do it. Byron Murphy, love him as a player. T'Vondre Sweat, really productive, proven player. But they're going to have to do it. On the edge, one of the key players to success for this Texas defense at the jack position on, I think it's the right side of this Texas defense, Barron Sorrell. You're going to hear this name a ton this season for Texas on broadcasts everywhere. He started all but 3 games last year at the edge position, and he led the defense with 5.5 sacks. Pretty good season. He was 4th in tackles for loss, 5th in tackles total as a sophomore. This year, there are high expectations for Barron Sorrell. We saw a lot of good things last year. He put on a lot of good tape, putting pressure on the quarterback. The numbers speak for themselves, but he's going to be asked to take a leap this year. He needs to have, I think the expectation is for him to have a 9-10 sack season, something that hasn't been done at Texas in quite a while now, is a double-digit sack season. He's going to have that type of season, an all Big 12 type season, if this Texas defense ultimately wants to go and elevate themselves to being very good to top 20 elite type defense in college football. Barron Sorrell is a key guy. Uh, and he was one of those guys, along with Tavondre Sweat, who was a Big 12 honorable mention last year. I expect him to play at an all Big 12 level. He needs to have an 8 or 9 sack season minimum because Texas is largely unproven otherwise at the edge rush position. And that's where we're going to talk about one of the biggest position battles that has been going on in fall camp, and that's the buck position opposite the Jack and Barron Sorrell, where they've kind of had a competition to see which of these young guys is going to step up. They're going to need one of them to step up. Now, one of the good things is for Texas, if we're talking big picture, they've started to recruit really well along the defensive line and now at the edge position. And we're going to talk some recruiting on Thursday, but there's a badass edge player coming to Texas as of right now. Just committed to Texas a little under 2 weeks ago in Colin Simmons, the number 1 overall prospect in the state of Texas for next year's recruiting class. Look him up. Look at his tape. Oh my God, this kid is unbelievable. Unbelievably talented. Texas fans are through the roof excited about what they have, as they haven't landed this caliber of edge rush prospect at the University of Texas in a long, long time. Like, these are the type of guys you have to have going into the SEC, and Texas is now getting those guys. But as far as this year is concerned, we're going to need one of either Ethan Burke and or Justice Finkley to step up and have the kind of season that Barron Sorrell had last year. And I think that guy's going to be Ethan Burke, number 91 on this Texas team. Ovio Gofu, who was a good player for Texas opposite Barron Sorrell last year, and, is a really solid player. He didn't transfer because things weren't working out. He just, he transferred to LSU. He's going to play at LSU this year. That just tells you everything you need to know about how good Ovio Gofu was. He's a good player. It's on, the redshirt freshman, Ethan Burke, to really make his impact felt this year. 4-star out of Westlake, former state top 10 former state top 20 recruit, 2-time state champ at Westlake. We all know Westlake High School in Austin. 6'6", good size, has put on a lot of weight in the offseason. We've heard a lot of really good things in camp. We're going to need him along with the combination of Justice Finkley, who was a top 10 recruit in the state of Alabama, with his athleticism and just pure strength. One of those guys is going to have to step up and have around the season that Barron Sorrell had last year. We need around a double-digit sack season from Barron Sorrell and a 4 or 5 sack year, maybe even a 6 sack year from one of these other guys opposite him. Because one of Texas' biggest issues was making plays when they got to the quarterback last year. Often, they would get pressure, but things wouldn't end up the way you want them to. You wouldn't get the end result. And so those guys are going to be really important. As I said, all the young talent they're bringing in at the edge position, this shouldn't be a problem moving forward. Colton Vasek, the super blue chip guy from Westlake, in this 2023 recruiting class, he was a borderline 5-star. He was a high 4-star, almost a 5-star. Could have been, I would argue, based on his tape. Billy Walton has made a surge in camp. Jamon Tapp, the redshirt freshman. They have a lot of really young, highly recruited type guys coming in, but all of these guys are unproven as it pertains to what they do at a college football level on a consistent basis. The only guy proven on this Texas roster from an edge rush perspective as a productive game in, game out player with the departure of Obi Ogofu to LSU is Barron Sorrell. And so they're going to need a guy to step up. I don't care who it is, but they're going to have a guy step up and be a productive player at that buck position. That's one of the keys to success for this Texas defense. That's the defensive front. Well, real quick, address the linebacker, and then I really want to talk about the secondary. We talked about Jaylan Ford. I mean, fantastic player. Third team All-American last year. First team All Big 12. Almost won Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. Should have, I would argue, but there were other good defensive players in the Big 12 last year. Led the team in tackles, interceptions, was second on the team in tackles for loss. I believe Texas had 8 interceptions last year, and Jaylan Ford was responsible for half of them. So, he's just a really cerebral, really good football player. And if he has another season, the caliber of what he did last year, and I expect it to potentially even be better than what he did last year, he could elevate himself into second team All-American, first team All-American type territory, which is great for Texas fans. He has the one guy this Texas defense cannot afford to lose, absolutely cannot afford to lose, is Jaylan Ford, period. That's it. Because what they have behind Jaylan Ford or next to Jaylan Ford, again, kind of going back to what we talked about at the edge position, it's not that it's not great. It's not that these guys aren't talented. They're unproven. Unproven. And Texas has tried year after year after year to win with unproven talent. And it just hasn't happened. Right? So they absolutely have to have Jaylan Ford because he can mask a lot of the other issues that you may have at that other linebacker spot. 3 guys stand out to me as guys that you could see rotate in at that other linebacker spot. David Binda, a guy who's been on campus a long time, solid player, former Texas top 100 recruit, stayed the course in his time at UT, going into this senior year, experience, knows this defense, really smart football player, but lower, upside, but will get the job done. Expect to see some of him, at least early on, until Anthony Hill, the 5-star freshman from Denton, Texas, gets his feet under him. But I do think Anthony Hill will rotate in at that linebacker spot. Those, I think, are going to be the 2 main guys that, play opposite Jaylan Ford or next to Jaylan Ford in this defense. And the hope is that by the end of this season, that Anthony Hill will be that guy. And Anthony Hill has been making a lot of noise in fall camp as a guy who not only is great and an absolute thumper in the run game, but a guy who they can line up on the edge even and can give them production from a pass rushing standpoint. He is an absolute freak athletically at that linebacker spot, and I'm so excited to see, if Texas is up 5 touchdowns against Rice next weekend, which they should be, does Anthony Hill, how many reps does Anthony Hill get, and what does he look like? It's super exciting. He's another guy, if you're not too familiar with some of these Texas recruits, look up Anthony Hill, go watch his high school tape. It's almost as impressive as Colin Simmons. It's that good. I really expect by the end of this year to see Anthony Hill in that position next to Jaylan Ford. And they have, a lot of young, talented linebackers that I expect good things from in the future, but aren't ready to make the immediate impact right now. So that's the middle linebacker spot. The main guy is Jaylan Ford, but keep an eye out for what we see from Anthony Hill this year. It's been a long time since Texas has had a guy at the linebacker position as talented as Anthony Hill. Jaylan Ford, was actually one of the lowest rated recruits, in the 2023 recruiting class, or the 2020 recruiting class when he came out of high school. Like, he's really one of those guys who ended up being a diamond in the rough, so to speak, with what he burst onto the scene and did last year. Anthony Hill is super blue chip good. I mean, he's 5-star, top 15 player nationally, the top linebacker in last year's recruiting class. And I think you're going to see a lot of good and exciting things from him playing next to Jalen Ford this upcoming season. But then again, that position, the position next to Jalen Ford, just like the position opposite Baron Sorrell, is unproven. So we'll have to see what that looks like. And then let's spend the last 5-10 minutes talking about the secondary. I think this is the best Texas secondary in at least 10 years. Maybe since their national championship teams. Definitely the most talented in the past 10 years. One of the deepest secondaries, period, in the country. Like, I think right now, their second team guys would go out and start for probably 70% of college football teams out there, at least. And that's not an exaggeration. This is a really good Texas secondary. This is what's going to be, I believe, the backbone of their defense this year. And I haven't been able to say that in my time really intently following Texas football. Haven't been able to say anything close to that, right? Oftentimes in the past, the secondary has been one of the pain points for Texas as a football team. This year, though, absolutely not. Absolutely not. This Texas secondary is going to be, maybe at the end of the season, it might end up being the best position group on this entire team. It's that good. Now, why do I say it's that good? Well, talk about Ryan Watts. Transferred in from Ohio State last offseason. 6'3", 200 pounds. Texas native, transferred in from Ohio State. Former top 25 recruit in the state of Texas. Started all 13 games as a junior last year. Earned Big 12 honorable mention. Had a really good season. Opposite Deshaun Jameson, was Texas's best corner. Really good year. Was a big part in the leap that this Texas defense took last year, and I think he's going to have a really, really good season, to the point where I think he's going to be a guy that gets drafted into the NFL after this season. He leads, I think Ryan Watts, with his size and his skills at the cornerback spot and his production, is a top 7 player on this Texas football team. And I'm really excited about the things he's going to bring this season. Now, opposite Ryan Watts is where you have a little bit of a position battle going on between Terrence Brooks and the borderline 5-star freshman Malik Muhammad. I fully expect Terrence Brooks to be the starter week 1 against Rice, and probably for much of the season. He played a lot at the end of last year, got some time as a true freshman, started 3 games at the end of last year, showed lots of promise. Again, Terrence Brooks was a borderline 5-star guy coming out of high school. Coming into his sophomore year with some experience to, playoff last year. Terrence Brooks, I think he's going to be the guy. His dad, within his family, he has NFL bloodlines. His dad played with Ronnie Lott in San Francisco in the NFL. Terrence Brooks is a really talented type guy. I think he's going to do great things. I'm really excited about what he can do. But Malik Muhammad has been making a surge in fall camp. Had a pick 6, I believe it was in last Saturday's scrimmage, and then this past Saturday had another interception and a bunch of passes defensed. Really talented guy, borderline. Both these guys are borderline 5 stars, and that just tells you all you need to know. Texas is dealing, for the first time that I've been following Texas football, they're dealing with first world problems at the cornerback position. So I think you're going to see both guys play, but Terrence Brooks expect to get majority of the snaps early on, and he's a guy you really want to watch. Like the combination of Terrence Brooks and Ryan Watts is one of the better cornerback duos that I can think of in college football right now, at least from a talent perspective. All of these guys that I'm talking about, it would be a shame if they didn't end up playing on Sundays. And then at the safety spot, one of the guys that gets really overlooked in this Texas defense and has been here for a long time, played the most snaps out of anybody on this Texas defense a year ago, is Jaron Thompson, the safety. Not super flashy, but very, very productive. 20 starts going back to his freshman season. He's entering, I believe, his senior year. Experience, knowledge of this defense, leads by example, third on the team in tackles, leader in snaps played. He's a really key linchpin to this Texas secondary. Really good in run defense, good tackler. Jaron Thompson's a really good player. Not the most flashy or most talented guy on this defense, but he's a really good player, and if he's like the least talented player in your secondary in today's age of college football, I mean, that really tells you all you need to know, because they bring in Jalen Catalon, who it's been a while, but he was a top 30 recruit in the state of Texas, going back to his days, I believe, in the 2020 recruiting class. Texas lost that battle to Arkansas. He went to Arkansas, was a 3-year starter, made all SEC first team as a freshman, and was a All-American in 2020, his freshman season. The one knock on Jalen Catalon, though, has been injuries. Injuries. He hasn't quite been able to regain that form of being an all-SEC type performer because he's had a multitude of injuries throughout the past couple of years. He's stayed healthy through fall camp. Hopefully that's a good sign. Has experience. His run-stopping skills, I mean, unbelievable. Experience. The coaches and the teammates love him. He's going to be a leader, bring that physicality. And I think he's going to be a really good player for Texas. Now, is he going to return to an all-SEC type level? I'm not sure. Is he going to be an All-American? Probably not. But really, really good starter to just plug in right next to Jaron Thompson. Like, that's a very, very high-end, good safety duo. And then Jahdae Barron at the nickel position, with the versatility to play a bunch of other positions, including safety. You can make the argument that behind Jalen Ford last year, Jahdae Barron was the best player on this defense, and I wouldn't scoff at you. In fact, I think he's a top 8 player on this team. But, what can we expect this year? Well, a lot of the questions pertaining to this Texas secondary, because there's another guy, Gavin Holmes, who transferred in from Wake Forest and was a really good starter there that we haven't even talked about yet, and goes along with guys like Terrence Brooks and, Ryan Watts and Malik Muhammad in the secondary. Like, they're too deep at every position, at least. So I think, we just crossed the hour mark, so I'll kind of wrap this up. This Texas defense, I have high expectations. Depth on the defensive line is key. I think Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy are going to have really, really good seasons. Alfred Collins has been making a ton of noise in camp with his athleticism. Excited to see the things that he can do. Vernon Broughton, Trill Carter, the 3-year starter at Minnesota, who's going to be a productive player for them. The defensive line is kind of sneakily one of the deeper positions on this football team. Again, Jalen Ford is going to spearhead this attack. I'm really excited to see the things that Anthony Hill can do opposite him, along with an experienced guy like David Binda. And then this Texas secondary, I just went through it. It's one of the better secondaries in the Big 12, maybe the best. And I think by the end of the season, will be one of the better secondaries in college football, period. I think there should be an expectation that as long as there's no major injuries, knock on wood, this Texas defense do what it did last year, if not do better than what it did last year, and finish as like a top 40, top 30-ish defense. I think that's a realistic expectation. And from everything that we've heard in fall camp so far, they've done that. Like, they have been in control in these scrimmages. Texas offense has not really been able to get much going in these scrimmages. The Texas defense, I think, has won both, been in control, and looked really good. Like, they haven't really had a bad practice yet as a collective group, and that's exciting. This is going to be a really good Texas defense. Proven defensive coordinator in PK, and really, really good personnel at all three levels. So that's going to wrap it up. Those are my expectations and my full breakdown of this Texas defense. We'll probably talk more about the defense leading up to next week's game and throughout the season for sure. But thank you for whoever has been watching so much. I think we have some chats that I need to answer. David asks, what positions do we lack depth in, and what does that expose on our end? Well, you don't lack depth in the secondary. You lack depth, proven depth at the linebacker spot behind Jalen Ford. Although there's lots of talent there, but it's unproven. And you lack proven depth at the edge rush position opposite Barron Sorrell. I kind of answered that, as I went through the defense. We'll talk about the offense on Thursday. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this. Like and subscribe. Go check out some of the other content on our channel. High expectations for the Texas defense this year. We'll see you on Thursday. Until then, hook 'em horns. It's almost that time of year. And I will see you on Thursday live at 9 o'clock. See you guys then.